Hello. Welcome back to episode 118 of the Guardian Project podcast. I'm your host, Andy, and I'm going on vacation this week, and people watching is one of my favorite things to do out of town. And sometimes I judge harshly. I'm a real shady traveler.
Oh, nice. A shady traveler. You're not the shady traveler that's trying to like sneak snacks onto the airplane. Well, I guess you don't really have to sneak too much onto the airplane, but
you don't, because if it's closed, you can just bring it into the airport. And if you buy it at the airport, you can bring it on the plane. But you do sneak snacks into the movie theater.
That's true.
100%.
That's very true. I always like hearing a can of pop opening in the theater. I go, oh yeah, that guy saved some money. And I'm your,
always.
And I'm your other host, Mike Coyle. And with the printing of Hostile Hostel, we finally have a transforming home, better known as a warehouse.
Mm-hmm.
Please listen carefully.
Yes, it is a warehouse.
Yes, it sure is.
And this is the show where we talk about all things Magic the Gathering.
But mostly Commander.
We've had a lot come out since we last met, because we recorded like 2 weeks ago. It feels like it was so long ago.
It has been. It has been, well, what, half a month, right? It's been a long time.
I guess you're right. 2 weeks is half of a month.
I'm just putting it's a fortnight for the people where that's a better time comparison.
That's what fortnight is? It's 2 weeks?
Yeah, 2 weeks is a fortnight. Yep.
I didn't know that.
Today,
interesting.
Today we all learned.
I've never heard that phrase. Nope.
So for the first announcement we have here, we have actually the banned and restricted announcement that happened for Pauper on September 8th. So there was 2 bannings of Chatter Storm and Sojourner's Companion, both of these cards being Modern Horizon 2 printed cards. So Modern Horizons 2 introduced a lot of new high-impact cards to Pauper. They've been watching the metagame adapt to these cards, and it was clear that the Chatterstorm Storm deck, in combination with First Day of Class from Strixhaven, which gave all of your creatures haste that would enter the battlefield after you cast First Day of Class, and you get to learn. I'm not really sure if the learning part was relevant, but for the combo, you cast First Day of Class, then cast Chatterstorm. Chatterstorm is Storm card that allowed you to get 1/1 squirrels. And it was really hard in the Pauper format to respond to it. The deck had over a 50% win rate against non-mirror matchups. And because of that, that's why they banned Chatterstorm. It doesn't ban the Storm decks out completely. They kept in Galvanic Relay, which allows you to have card advantage at Storm, but it makes you wait until the next turn. They saw Galvanic Relay wasn't really like a combo card where you were going to win, but it was really just used more for card advantage, so they kept that in. And then Sojourner's Companion was the top end, or one of the top ends for the Affinity deck, and they decided to ban it, not because Affinity was really taking over the format. It definitely wasn't better than the Chatterstorm deck or anything like that, but it was really good against a lot of the fringe decks, and they want to support a healthy metagame in the Pauper and allow these fringe decks to actually compete, and the Affinity deck was just not even allowing them to break out or anything, so they banned Sojourner's Companion, and now we have a new Pauper format.
What was interesting leading up to this was that there was an actual event where the players playing it brought in 60 card basic land decks, and the deck that won was a 60 basic land deck because they were protesting how. I mean, words that I've read, I haven't played Pauper in a long, I haven't played paper 60 card format in a really long time, like over 2 years now. Obviously pandemic and all, was atrocious is basically what I was reading. And they were like, we don't know what to do, how to beg for a banning. We don't even know what to do. And so it took an event where of the top 8, I believe it was 7 of the top 8 decks, if I remember correctly, were 60 card basic land decks.
Wow.
To say we're done with this format. So as soon as those, I think, were published, if memory serves correct, the following day, it's just a sweep from the website, and it's published on Wizards website. It was like, here's your #1 deck, and it was like 60 Forest or something like that. And there was an announcement. It was like, there will be a ban and restricted announcements for Pauper, and it was announced that day. It's like, yeah. So it was unfortunate, but they got what they wanted, and it sounds like there's going to be a more diverse format, although some people were sad to see Sojourner's Companion gone. We also have another announcement hot off the press. This week, we got the Commander September 2021 quarterly update. And this came with a banning and an unbanning and removal of a rule. So we'll probably spend a little bit of time on this today. Number one here is Rule 10 was removed from Commander. Rule 10 stated that commanders were subject to the legend rule. Sheldon Menery had actually written an article on Star City Games, and we'll have links to all of this in the show notes, but was providing a little bit more color here than just the announcement. They said the rule remained as an artifact at the time because this was created when the legend rule was less stable. It's not a commander-specific rule, but simply existed as a clarification. And they said since it's redundant, they chose to eliminate it. So Rule 704.5 in Magic just says that the legendary rule exists. So they said Rule 11 in Commander is going to be bumped up to Rule 10, which just makes sense. It was just clarifying it and wasn't necessary anymore. We have a banning and an unbanning. We'll start with the unbanning. World Fire is unbanned. So World Fire is a sorcery, 6 red, red, red. Exile all permanents. Exile all cards from all players' hands and graveyards, and each player's life total becomes 1. So the announcement says Worldfire was banned due to the problematic interaction with floating mana and having access to your commander. They want to foster a commander environment where 8 and 9 mana spells are viable and likely to show up in-game, so they evaluate the expensive ones in that context. It says, unlike Coalition Victory and Biorhythm, which we continue to believe are in fact problematic in that environment, the level of effort needed to make Worldfire effective is sufficient that they suspect it will not be much of an issue. There are already much cheaper ways to do some things like this in the format, and they believe the social contract and robust pregame discussions will keep Worldfire out of games in which it doesn't belong. So, adding a bit more color, I read the notes so you didn't have to. They said this was really a discussion involving more than just Worldfire. So I looked at other big spells, like mentioned here, Coalition, Victory, Biorhythm, even Sway of the Stars. They said the problem with these compared to Worldfire isn't the same. Coalition Victory requires an answer at the very moment or that game ends. Biorhythm is trivial to cast in green at 8 mana, and if Biorhythm says each player's life total becomes the number of creatures they control. So for a green deck, you're ramping into it with creatures, you're likely going to be alive when you resolve it. And if other people are on potentially turn 4 or 5 don't have creatures yet because they're still trying to get into the swing of the game, they just lose, so it's a little problematic. They also said that a green mana that deals 150 plus damage like Biorhythm is something they want to avoid. So that's kind of where they're at with this. Worldfire doesn't really refill your hand like Sway of the Stars. So they said they doubt there's going to be a surgence of Norn the Wary or Zozu decks after the unbanning, but if there is, it happens. How do you feel about this unbanning? Personally, I didn't see it coming. I don't think it's going to be a problem. I don't myself expect to get Worldfired, but I wouldn't be upset to see it every once in a while.
Yeah, no, I don't expect any Worldfire to be showing up in our play groups. We don't have anyone running Armageddons in our play groups or anything like that.
Nope.
So, I mean, the closest thing to this that we have is maybe like a merciless eviction where you have to choose the permanent type that gets exiled. Now, our play group isn't going to see Worldfire, but I mean, if you have a way to have this win the game for you, so if you can cast it at instant speed while you have a pinger targeting everyone or something, and then it just kills everyone right there, I say go for it. Why not?
Yeah, so Norn the Wary is just a commander that it's a 2/1 for 1 red when a player casts a spell or it attacks you. You can you blink it out of existence.
Yeah.
So I mean, I guess you have your commander, because really all that's left is you have options. You have access to a commander, right? Because you have no cards in your hand, and so if you have floated, if you floated mana, you can play it, and if you can cast Zozu, I guess. So in this case, you'd be paying 12. Assuming you haven't cast Zozu when someone plays a land, they're just out. I don't know. I don't mind it. I'm happy to see it come back. The next card is been very controversial online. We sympathize with people who have this deck. Did not see this coming. I will say I was talking about it in our Discord. So if you're in there, you already saw some of my notes on this. But Golos, Tireless Pilgrim is banned. So Golos is a 3/5 legendary artifact creature scout for 5 colorless. that says when it enters the battlefield, you can search your library for a land, put it onto the battlefield tapped, and shuffle your library. And then it has an activated ability. 2 white, blue, black, red, green, so 7 total. Exile the top 3 cards of your library. You can play them this turn without paying their mana costs. Really good card. If you watched any of our Boxing League series on YouTube, Golos, I think, wins half of the games. It's just very good. So the announcement says Golos Tireless Pilgrim has been a much discussed card that is both popular to play with and unpopular to play against. There are many problems with the card, but the greatest is the low to middle tiers where they focus on the ban list. So Golos is simply a better choice of leader for all but the most commander-centric decks. Its presence crushes the kind of diversity in commander that they really want to promote. You can drop in Golos and a few 5-color lands into a random deck and get all the rampant card advantage you would ever want from a commander with no worries about your mana base. Golos' ability effectively reduces your commander tax to 1, and once you hit 7 mana, with Golos, assuming that you have white, blue, black, red, green to cast all of your spells and activate this ability, you don't really need to do anything the rest of the game except cast all of your top 3 cards for free, something that they want to be careful about. So they actually talked to Wizards about this, and they said that they understand the problems created by generically powerful 5-color commanders that don't even have white, blue, black, red, green in their mana cost. They don't expect similar cards to come from them in the future, so a Surgical Strike now makes sense. They understand that many players love Golos, and they don't take this action lightly. In the end, the health of the format is their primary concern, and they find Golos unhealthy. And they do mention that while Kenrith the Returned King is a similarly flexible commander for good 5-color good stuff decks, they see it as a clear step down from Golos. So it's a mouthful. And a little bit more color here was that Golos doesn't have a restriction in its mana cost. You do reduce your commander tax by 1 to get a land. And they said that the color restriction was something that mattered in Commander and that it really affects your mana base, right? So if you're in a 3-color deck, you have to find the right lands to fill that 3-color deck. And this you can have just generically good any land you want. They also went on to say that Wizards has been taking this into account when they brought it up since 2019. So this is when Sheldon mentioned that it had been addressed. They said if you look at the last few sets, you can see a move to a more niche design. And Sheldon mentions commander diversity and that it wasn't easy, but that when a card has such a sweeping impact on the format, they're compelled to take action. And funny enough, Golos was the #1, we've talked about it, the #1 most built commander you can see on EDH Rec. It's actually, if you go to EDH Rec now, Corvold, Fey-Curse King, is now listed as #1 because it is now banned. So this was huge. I did not see this coming. And I personally am very glad for the people in our Discord and people I played with that did play Golos maybe in a non-oppressive way. I certainly can see how it could be oppressive because I've played against Kenrith, which is funny because you took apart your Kenrith deck because of how consistently good it was.
Yeah, I had a few different Kenrith builds, and all of them ended up being Kenrith's really, really good. That was the deck. But I did have a lot of the cost reducers and stuff that are going in it. The value wasn't purely on Kenrith, and I think that's the problem here with Golos. And like you mentioned, yeah, the #1 most built commander of all time. And as we looked at our budget episode that we had last week, we see Essica actually going up the ranks a lot in a lot of these 5-color good stuff decks. And I was curious when I heard about Golos and the reason it was banned, I was like, ooh, but Essica costs 5 different pips of mana in order to cast the planar bridge side of her. So that one I think is going to be safe. And you know, Atraxa was like one of the most built commanders, but that's got 4 pips, hard to cast, doesn't give you complete upside on everything. You know, you have to build into a counter strategy and stuff. So I can understand where they come from. Goals, yeah, I was with you though. Definitely did not see it coming, and I'm really enjoying all of the actually real Rule Zero conversations that are happening in our Discord about people, you know, who don't want to take their Golos decks apart, having that Rule Zero conversation to say, I would still like to play this as, even though it is a banned commander and everything. So it's not yet a go by retired Pilgrim yet. So Rule Zero Golos is still here.
Yes, and if a lot of the discussion online is talking about Maze's end decks or alternate win cons that they were playing with it, and they weren't purely casting spells for free. So may I suggest, if you are looking for another option, Niv Mizzet Reborn is a really good option. I also had a Joda Archmage Eternal deck. It's not the same thing. I completely get it. You wanted to get that land to grab the Maze's end or to kind of start going. I get it. I hear that. It's unfortunate, and I empathize for anybody who now has to rebuild. Fortunately, there are a couple of options. So the deck isn't obsolete. You can put in another 5-color commander, but yeah, it's tough. And I am surprised to see the top card gone.
Yeah, absolutely.
And last, Innistrad Midnight Hunt has been fully previewed, and not only are we returning to Innistrad, but we are going to see the return of the Magic stories. You can find them online at Daily MTG. As of right now, the time of recording, the first 2 stories out, and they're good. So if you enjoy the online story series, go check that out, because I don't think that we had that since, what, Ixalan? Is that the last time we had full stories?
Dominaria? We had Zendikar. Zendikar had the online stories.
Zendikar did, yes.
Okay.
Zendikar did have it. So we are getting more stories. So I'm very excited for that. But before we continue, we have to thank all of you for listening. Thank you to all of our listeners and all of our to all of our patrons for all of your support. If you want to support us, you can head to patreon.com/Guardian Project Pod and donate for any dollar amount. We got lots of cool stuff to give away.
And if you're looking for another way to support the podcast, whatever platform you are listening to the podcast on now, if you could subscribe, rate, review, and leave comments, we would really appreciate it.
Yeah, and you can find us online at theguardianprojectpodcast.com. You can find our social media on Twitter at GuardianPod, our gameplay videos at youtube.com/theguardianproject. And if you want to email us, you can either jump into our Discord or email us at guardianprojectpod@gmail.com. Coyle, what is on the agenda for this week?
Well, as you mentioned, now that Innistrad Midnight Hunt has been fully previewed, we are going to go through the cards that we plan to play and add to our arsenal of commander decks. And we obviously have to go over the staples that we're going to be putting in your Noyandar deck and my Shirey deck at the end. So yeah, time to hunt.
So we are back on Innistrad, and I am very excited about that. It's been a minute since we have been to Innistrad. The last time we were there was the Shadows block, which, funny enough, when we were talking about this in our Discord, people were asking to go over your top 5 sets of all time. I really liked Shadows and Eldritch Moon. So I'm excited that we're back here. And coming along with Midnight Hunt, we are going to get some new mechanics and some returning mechanics. The first one, probably one of the most notable from Innistrad, is Werewolves. So they return on double face cards, and Transform now has a keyword mechanic. So Daybound and Nightbound. Once something causes it to become day or night, you track that for the entire table for the rest of the game, and you transform all permanents with Daybound or Nightbound when that time changes. So you're not going to see werewolves that are sometimes on the werewolf side and sometimes on the human side, except the old ones, because they don't all have Daybound and Nightbound. Only the new ones will have this, although it's being reviewed. They said, so when the time changes, they enter with the appropriate side. So if it's night, and you have a Daybound, Nightbound card, it's going to enter on the time of day. So if it's night, it's going to enter on the Nightbound side. So I'm very excited about this mechanic. I love werewolves. What do you think about that?
I don't like it. It's weird that it's a different kind of way to do the transforming with werewolves, and obviously people talked about that and hoping that maybe the mechanics can get aligned somehow. But I do like the day-night thing, the day-night mechanic. I think it's way more clear this way. If it's night, everything is the night side. If it's day, everything's the day side. You don't have to always figure out, you still have to figure out whether someone cast 2 spells or no spells to see if the whole thing transformed, but you don't have to do it by permanent basis. So yes, that's kind of nice. Still personally not a huge fan of transforming in werewolves and that kind of stuff, but I think they did it in a much more clear way this way. So I'm happy with that.
Yep, I agree. I agree.
The next mechanic we have here is Coven. And Coven is a brand new ability that gives you extra effects if you control 3 or more creatures with different powers. I think a lot of the Coven stuff is going on the humans in the deck. I think even specifically Warlock humans in the deck. So we're going to see, and in fact, I think one of the commander decks is based around the Coven ability, or at least the Coven ability is on the face commander for one of the commander decks being released with the Innistrad set. So interesting to see. I mean, you have to control 3 creatures in order to activate your Coven, so it's a little bit hard to trigger. Maybe, you know, the humans are low enough to the ground where you can get 3 humans by turn 2 or turn 3 and start activating some Coven abilities in standard.
Yeah, and you have to have 3 creatures with different powers specifically. And I do see the new Sigarda. So Sigarda is an angel. It at least has Coven. So I'm not sure if it's specific to Warlock. Maybe it is for the rest of them. It reminds me a lot of like Battalion, right? You swing with 3 creatures so interesting there. Haven't seen this from the humans before. We're also getting Disturb. Disturb is a keyword ability that allows you to cast cards from your graveyard transformed. So this is, I believe, specifically related to the spirits of the set. So Malevolent Hermit is a specific card. An example here. It's a 2/1 that has Disturb for 2 and a blue, and it says you may cast this card from your graveyard transformed for its Disturb cost, which becomes Benevolent Geist. And it's a spirit wizard with flying that says non-creature spells your opponents can't be countered, and if it will be put into a graveyard from anywhere, exile it instead. I like the flavor here because you're kind of like resurrecting the body, but now it's a spirit because it's dead.
Yeah, this is, I know we haven't gone through all the mechanics yet, but this is absolutely my favorite mechanic in this whole
It's
set.
very cool.
I think
it's very cool.
I am scared for the limited format and how strong Disturbed is going to be in the limited format. I think blue-white looks really good with both Flashback and Disturb. With card advantage without having to draw cards, you know, being able to cast from your graveyard and stuff. But it makes me very, very excited for it though too.
Yeah.
So the next one we have, the next brand new mechanic we have is Decayed. So Decayed is a new ability that typically is put onto a zombie or a zombie token. Most of the zombie tokens, if not all of the zombie tokens that are made in this set, actually have this keyword Decayed. And if a zombie has Decay, or if a creature has Decayed, then it cannot block, and they are sacrificed at the end of combat when you attack with them. So interesting. It doesn't force you to attack with the creature. So if you do want to just have the creature stick around for a while, it can't block. So it's very much incentivizing you to attack with the creature and just have it die at the end. But there's definitely some cards out here with Decayed that are going to be nice. Is just get an extra token, get an extra attacker. Maybe you want to sacrifice the token to trigger an aristocrat or get some mana or something. But I really like this limited ability of a new type of zombie token.
Yeah. And this is the first time we're seeing where they can make a lot more tokens for cheaper because there's a drawback on them, right? So they can't block and they're sacrificed. So you're not just going to keep them for forever. So I do like that. And we're seeing the return of Flashback and a little bit of Investigate. So Flashback is returning. You can cast a card for its Flashback cost and then exile it from the graveyard, and then Investigate. We're going to make some clues. Not a ton, but I do like seeing Investigate back. I've always liked that mechanic.
Yeah, absolutely. And with all the extra, you know, artifact token stuff that we've been seeing, you know, Academy Manufactor and all that stuff, Investigate becomes infinitely times better. So, you know, the further we get into Magic, the better all these mechanics get.
Yeah. So let's go through our list of cards. So we each had to cut this down because there's a lot of really good cards in this set. And I'm happy to report we got some real uppers here in white. Like real great cards. So I'm going to start out here with one of my favorites from the set. It's actually just a common, Cathar Commando. So a 3/1 human soldier for 1 and a white with flash. And it says pay 1, sacrifice Cathar Commando, destroy target artifact or enchantment. So this is very good. It's a white caustic caterpillar.
White caustic caterpillar with flash.
With flash. Now, instead of costing a single green, it costs 1 and a white, but Caustic Caterpillar costs 2 to sacrifice. This one only costs 1 to sacrifice. So for 3 mana, you can flash in a 3/1 blocker and then sacrifice it to destroy an artifact or enchantment. Yes, please.
I mean, even a 3/1 creature for 2 mana with flash is very strong in limited format, standard format. I mean, maybe a 3/1 in Commander isn't all that great, but
yeah, it's a creature,
but it
body
can
to block.
but it can destroy stuff. Yeah, but I mean, I think this is very pushed. Honestly, this is a very, very strong card, and it's at common. It's at common. It's crazy.
We're seeing, and I think, and I'm hoping it's not necessarily true. You know, the actual definition of power creep, right, is that cards become obsolete because there's just a better version, or people start saying, well, it's a staple, you don't want to do the other thing. It's just like, it's redundancy, but this is very good. And there's a lot of these very good cards in this set.
Absolutely. So. Well, let me go on the other foot and talk about a mythic rather than a common that I really like. This is a legendary enchantment mythic called the Meat Hook Massacre. The Meat Hook Massacre costs X black, again, for a legendary enchantment that says when the Meat Hook Massacre enters the battlefield, each creature gets a -X until end of turn. In a separate line of text, it says whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life. And in another separate line of text, whenever a creature an opponent controlled dies, you gain 1 life. So when I just look at this card, like with the mana value and everything, it's an X black that gives everything -X. I instantly thought it was a sorcery, and I didn't realize it was actually a legendary enchantment. So I consider this almost a modal card, because you can cast it for just 2 black and just get the enchantment itself that helps it. You know, when you have stuff die, you get to drain your opponent, and then when your opponent has stuff dies, you get stuff. You can use it as a board wipe later on in the game if you have a lot of mana to pump into the X. If you have any commanders where you're trying to manipulate power and toughness, this could also help with that. Like for a Shirey deck, I can cast this for X = 1 and make a bunch of 2 power creatures into 1 power creatures. And, you know, Grey Merchant of Asphodel comes to mind. If I can make Grey Merchant a 1 power creature, it works a lot better with Shirey. So very excited for the implications of this card. Obviously, mono black decks are going to want it, right?
Yeah, I had not planned on playing this card, but I did see yesterday people were talking about Meat Hook Massacre actually being played for 0 if for some reason you needed a legendary permanent on the battlefield. So you can cast the sorceries that require a legendary permanent, right? Is it a legendary permanent, or is it a legendary creature specifically for those things like Yawgmoth's Vile Offering?
Yeah, the legendary sorceries require a legendary creature or planeswalker, unfortunately.
Okay, so I can't cast Yawgmoth's Vile Offering after I put hands on Meat Hooks.
Mox Amber might work, though. That one might only care about a legendary permanent.
Oh, okay. So you can, black, and you can turn on a Mox Amber.
That's right. In a Keurig deck, you just paid 4 life to get a free mana rock. Except you already had Keurig, so you don't need Meat Hook Massacre.
When I saw this, so there's a movie called Meat Hook Massacre, and also I've been watching a lot of streamers play Dead by Daylight, and I guess I didn't equate this to like the gothic horror, but it makes sense to have this. It's a creepy card, and that guy is butchering someone in the background.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm curious, like, why it's a hand on the hook. Like, I just feel like that's an homage to like Peter Pan or something. You know, a hand on a hook seems ironic, seeing as people have hook hands.
Exactly. So moving on, I couldn't cut my list down. I told Coyle I was having a hard time cutting. So instead, I'm going to have a small section. So white got some really good card draw this set. Actually, we got 4 cards in total that have card draw in mono white. So we have Search Party Captain, Sigarda Splendor, Cursive Silence, and Sunset Revelry. So Search Party Captain is a 2/2 that costs 1 less for each creature that attacked. It costs 3 and a white, and when it enters, you can draw a card. It's a human. I think it's relevant. Sigarda Splendor for 2 and white's an enchantment that when it enters the battlefield, you have to note your life total. At the beginning of your upkeep, draw a card if your life total is greater than or equal to the last time you noted your life, and then note your life again. And whenever you cast a white spell, you gain a life. So this is a cool way to just draw a card. You have to keep gaining life throughout the game. Cursive Silence is an aura. It's an enchantment aura curse for 1 white. It says enchant player, as Cursive Silence enters the battlefield, choose a card name. Spells with the chosen name enchanted player casts costs 2 colorless more to cast, and whenever enchanted player casts a spell with that name, you may sacrifice Cursive Silence if you do draw a card. And last, we have Sunset Revelry, which this one is my favorite. For 1 and a white, it's a sorcery that says if an opponent has more life than you, gain 4 life. If an opponent controls more creatures than you, create 2 1/1 white human creature tokens. And if an opponent has more cards in hand than you, draw a card. It does all of them. It doesn't check. It's not 1 or 2. It's all of them. And in a lot of cases, I feel like I'm going to hit all 3 almost always in the decks that I want to put these in. So we got some card draw here. What do you think of these?
I mean, I think they're pretty cool. I do hope that Sigarda's Splendor comes with a Sigarda's notebook for how many times I have to note my life total when it happens. But no, I do like, I especially like the Cursive Silence and the way that this card is put together, in that it makes it says, I know you have a card that I don't want you to cast, and so I'm just going to make it a little bit harder for you to cast. And then once you cast it, I'm going to go, okay, well, I don't need this permanent anymore. I'm going to draw a card and let it go. Or if it's on someone's commander, then you can keep it on forever. But I really like the way that it's structured so that you can sacrifice it and draw a card after you're done with it. You know, to me, this is better than Nevermore. And it only costs 1 mana, which is really cool. But yeah, the card draw on Sunset Revelry, I really like. A 2-mana sorcery. Maybe there's a lot of ways you can bring it back. It kind of gives me a lot of Lingering Souls vibe. And what's the other one? There's an instant speed. If you have less life, you gain life, and if you have less creatures, you get creature like 1/1 human creature tokens. That's sometimes used in Modern. Well, anyway, I forget what it is, but it's very Lingering Souls-esque, and I see like Search Party Captain potentially being like a Lingering Souls type of a creature to be put in there that you can cast for just 1 white.
So Cursive Silence I like a lot more than Nevermore, only because Nevermore just says that card can't be cast ever again.
Right.
Curse at least lets you cast it.
Right.
And then you can draw a card.
Absolutely.
And Nevermore is rough, but also from Innistrad.
Yeah, very cool. And then Sigarda's Splendor, you know, having to note your life total all the time. It's something cool that it's something extra, and you know, you could potentially draw cards every single turn in white with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So very cool to see mono white get these staples, you know, and this curse. And speaking of curses, the next card, one of my cards that I plan on slotting into a deck, is Cursive Surveillance. Cursive Surveillance is a 5-mana enchantment or a curse for 4 and a blue. It enchants a player, and it says at the beginning of enchanted player's upkeep, any number of target players other than that player each draw cards equal to the number of curses attached to that player. So if you've ever had a curses deck, you would know that card draw is especially good, like Cursive Verbosity and stuff, which incentivizes people to attack someone in order for them to draw cards and you to draw cards. So Cursive Surveillance is going to do something similar. So in a curse-centric deck, this is obviously going to do a lot of work and draw a lot of cards all at once. But even in a non-curse-centric deck, you can just put it on someone and be like, hey, we all need to find answers, so let's all draw a card and try to get an answer. You know, kind of like having a Temple Bell, but only for 3 players instead of 1 player. So I think a lot of people are going to find some fun uses for this. If you have an Arden deck that runs blue, I highly recommend just throw this in here. Then you can start swapping it from person to person with Arden at your combat step. And I actually did take my curses deck apart, but I think the reason I wasn't having fun with it was because of, Andy, you're going to love this, the companion that I had with it, Karuga. So I think I'm going to be able to put this my Bant curses deck back together, and Cursive Surveillance will be a really good card draw spell for me.
I don't think I could play this because of, like, this artwork's gross.
I think
so nasty.
If you're playing Eyeball Tribal, though, you probably have to play this.
I guess.
Only because you don't have enough eyeballs to fill out the list anyways.
There's an eyeball at the tip of the ring finger.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, so nasty. Like, you can't lift heavy objects because you're going to poke your eye out.
Well, I mean, I guess they might have strong prescriptions. You don't know.
They're wearing contacts. You definitely can't poke the eye out. There's contact in there.
They definitely can physically contact you with their own eyeballs. That's for sure.
Oh, boo.
Well, hey.
All right. My next card here is Dennick, Pious Apprentice. So Dennick is a 2/3 legendary creature, human soldier, for a white and a blue that has lifelink, and cards in graveyards can't be the targets of spells or abilities, and it has Disturb for 2 white and a blue. And it comes back as Dennick Pious Apparition that says flying. Whenever one or more creature cards are put into graveyards from anywhere, investigate. This ability triggers only once each turn. And if Dennick Pious Apparition will be put into a graveyard from anywhere, exile it instead. I just think this is a cool legendary that I want to put into Niambi Esteemed Speaker. So I have a legendary tribal or a legendary matters blue-white deck. I can discard it to Niambi and then disturb it back. So it's built, the reanimate on it is built into this. And I just think having whenever one or more creatures are put into graveyards from anywhere, investigate, I'm discarding in Niambi a legendary permanent, lot of legendary creatures, so I can get a clue by discarding before I reanimate. This is exactly what Niambi wants. And it's cheap, so I can play it early if I need a blocker.
Now, you do have to be careful, though, because if you have it out, then you won't be able to reanimate anything.
Correct. But that's okay. I don't mind, because in most cases, I don't think Dennick is going to do much. But if someone really doesn't want me to be able to reanimate something, they're probably not going to swing at me so I can block with Dennick. So it's kind of a win-win here.
For sure, for sure. I was considering whether or not this was going to go in my humans deck, but I think this is a better card for my Vega deck. Not only can I cast the card from my graveyard, triggering Vega, but Vega already doesn't have a lot of creatures. So this particular card, along with all of the Disturb cards in the set, are going to be really great additions. This is, I think, one of the best, if not the best, Disturb card in the whole set.
Yeah, I think this card's really cool. I don't know how Dennick went down, but I'm looking forward to seeing the story because clearly it's disturbed. So at some point, Dennick,
maybe he'll get back up again.
Past beyond. I get knocked down.
Get back up again. It's
but
disturbing.
I disturb again.
All right. So the next card we have on here, some might have overlooked it and seen as not exciting. I think this is super, super exciting. This is Arden Elementalist. So Arden Elementalist is a 4-mana human shaman for 3 and a red. It's 2 power, 1 toughness. That's irrelevant. It says when Arden Elementalist enters the battlefield, return target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. Something we've seen on many, many cards before, but all of those cards have at least had blue in them before. I think there's actually a colorless card that can do the same thing, but to the top of your library rather than to your hand. So having an Archaeomancer, an Archaeomancer, or however you pronounce it.
Archaeomancer.
Hey, whoever you pronounce it at home, but in mono red, I think is very relevant for a lot of your red Spellslinger decks. Andy, I know you have your Rionia deck. Maybe this would be relevant if you don't, kill the whole board in 1 turn and it takes 2 turns. You could get another one of your instant sorceries back. Being able to return your Jessica's Will back to your hand. You don't have to continuously cast it with an Underworld Breach. You can just bring it back to your hand now with Arden Elementalist. It's gonna bring a lot more like budget options to red Spellslinger type decks in order to recur those cards. Red doesn't have a whole lot of card draw or anything. They have to discard a lot of cards. So maybe there's a card that you had to loot away in order to get something more relevant for the time being, but later on you wanted your instant or sorcery. You can get it back with this. There's probably some crazy shenanigans you can do with like Kiki Jiki and a spell that untaps a creature or something that you can do some crazy shenanigans with this. I haven't figured it out completely. I'm just excited to be able to return instant and sorceries to my hand in mono red.
In mono red. Yeah, this is a good card. It's just a good card. I like it a lot. I had overlooked it, I'll be honest, until you pointed it out to me. And I said, oh gosh, that was there. I was looking at so many cards that red was not the list that I was hitting because I was more focused on all the blue-white stuff I got with this set.
Seriously. I mean, the commons in this set are really, really strong. And don't focus on the mythics completely. These commons are strong and they're going in your 99 whether you know it or not. So the next one we have here is Fateful Absence. I think this is going to end up being a staple in a lot of decks out there in Commander. Fateful Absence is a 2-mana instant for 1 and a white that says destroy target creature or planeswalker. Its controller investigates. So 2 mana instant, destroy creature, absolutely insane. In white, typically there's a drawback like Path of Exile and Swords to Plowshares. I know those 2 exile, they don't destroy, but the drawbacks you get are your opponent gets to get a basic land, or I guess the controller gets to get a basic land, and the controller gets to gain life equal to its power. Fateful Absence is allowing you to investigate. There's very few decks out there where investigating would be better than gaining life or getting a free basic from exiling something. So I think this particular removal spell is going to go very far and be an auto include in not just white decks, but decks that just have white. I mean, decks splash white for removal for cards like this right here.
They do. You know what's interesting is this one is destroy, and we have another destroy card coming up as well. I personally would rather just exile, and I'm getting to the point now where I'm having issues cutting cards from decks. And I was not as high on this one as you are. I do like destroying target creature or planeswalker. The planeswalker is what's relevant, I think, here, because I think I'd still try to play my Swords to Plowshares and Path to Exile over this.
I definitely think you still play those 2 over this. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I'm having issues cutting already. I don't know where to fit this card in because I just want them to be exiled. In most cases, when I want to get rid of the thing, I don't want it in someone's graveyard because I play with you too often and you just bring it back.
Well,
I don't want you to have it back.
Just exile my graveyard instead. It's fine.
Yes, exactly. Great card. We're talking about a lot of white this time. It's funny, we get on one color sometimes in these sets. I think Commander Legends was like almost all red.
Yeah.
This one, Vanquish the Horde. So 6 white for a sorcery that says destroy all creatures. This spell costs 1 less to cast for each creature on the battlefield. So it could cost white to destroy all creatures. I love this. I think it's always going to be reduced, almost always in EDH. I think I would probably run this over some of the more expensive board wipes or sweepers. So maybe the fumigates, but see, a lot of the time fumigates included because people want to gain life, because that might be relevant. I think this is a fantastic card. It's already pre-ordering around $8. I'm sure it'll go down, but this just feels like the mono white Blasphemous Act. But in this case, it's destroy, and sometimes 13 damage isn't enough. Or if they prevent the damage, this is just destroy. It's cool. I love it. Gonna see play. I'm gonna hit. They're gonna vanquish my horde often.
Vanquish that horde often. I really like it. 4 creatures to turn it into a Wrath of God, so that's not even that big of a deal to have on the battlefield. And yeah, I totally. I can't even count the number of times a Blasphemous Act didn't board wipe. So I totally understand where you're coming from there.
In this, we actually get to see Odrick. So Odrick doesn't have a card this set. Maybe next set. Who knows? But Odrick standing here. And I like the flavor text on this one. Odrick took no joy in violence, but neither did he mourn for the twisted things he dispatched. I assume all these weird Eldrazi nonsense things are getting dispatched at this point. I'm curious to see where everything goes.
Probably by a vehicle, as Odrick is very well known for driving, as all mono white Odrick players know.
Yes, Odrick vehicles. Check it out.
So the next card I have on here is an uncommon artifact that you're going to end up playing in so many decks. Moonsilver Key. So for 2 generic mana, you get an artifact that you can pay 1 generic, tap it, and sacrifice it to search your library for an artifact card with a mana ability or a basic land card, reveal it, put it into your hand, and then shuffle. So 3 mana to find a basic land, put it in your hand, isn't the greatest thing in the world, but it is a great backup plan if you accidentally draw your Soul Ring the turn after you put Moonsilver Key out onto the battlefield. But there's a lot of really cool things that you can do with this. Mana abilities come in a lot of different shapes and sizes, so you can definitely go grab your Ashnod's Altar or your Phyrexian Altar, because those do have mana abilities on there, and they are artifacts. So you can also grab your Basalt Monolith in case it is a combo piece for something. If you have a Metal Worker or something, that is also a mana ability that you can go grab with this. I also have not opened the floodgates on this on all of the cards that you can go and grab, but I'm sure there's some creatures out there that have some less than relevant mana abilities, but more than relevant other abilities that you can kind of cheat your way and search for them with this Moonsilver Key. It's especially good in artifact decks. I plan on putting this in my Osgear deck so that I can get more than one Moonsilver Key. I'll be able to sacrifice probably 3 of them in a game and go find a bunch of rocks.
Now, do we think the Sun Gold Lock is a card that's coming out in the next set? Because the flavor text here says, to restore the day-night balance, the Celestis mechanism's Sun Gold Lock must be reunited with its long-lost key.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if this is another, we're gonna get the key here to go find something for the I love this stuff, and I'm hoping we see this Sun Gold Lock.
This was like the gate to the afterlife from Amonkhet, and then we got God Pharaoh's gift in Hour of Devastation. It actually searched for it.
The 3 original pieces for Kaldra, I believe those were in 3 different sets. So I'm wondering if this is a reveal here. So I'm curious because we have the Celestis. So
all right, so we're gonna put it on the board. The Sun Gold Lock will have a mana ability and will be an artifact.
Exactly. But what does it do now?
What it do? What that dog do?
All right, my last card here on this list, because I couldn't cut it down, is Katilda Dawnheart Prime. So this is a 1/1 human warlock legendary creature for green and white. And it says protection from werewolves. Human creatures you control have tap, add 1 mana of any of this creature's colors to your mana pool, and then also pay 4 green and white and tap. Put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. I have a Sigarda Heron's Grace humans deck. You have, if you've watched any of our streams, or you've probably watched this, and it's a very fun deck. I always want mana, and I left out. There's some cards. There's some humans that already give humans have tap to add mana, but they cost, I believe, 4. It was like Citnual Hierophants or something like that. I can't remember. And I cut them because they were expensive, and I needed it sooner. For 2 mana here, this is basically giving me a secondary. Oh my gosh, the enchantment. All your creatures have tap to add 1 color to your mana pool.
Yeah, it's a green. It's a green and 1. Yep. Yep. It's
a card. So anyway, while I think of the name of that card, I'm putting this in my Sigarda Heron's Grace deck, and you're actually going to be putting this in your Morophon Humans deck, right?
Yeah, I think it's just going to be really good. So when people are looking at it, they might be looking at it as a commander itself in a green-white deck and having things being able to produce green or white or both. I have a 5-color Morophon Humans deck where I can potentially have my Garth One-Eye tap for 1 mana of any color here, on top of just having a really good mana sink to put +1/+1 counters on all of my creatures. If you know about my Morophon deck, the idea is all of the creatures in there cost as little as possible after Morophon's on the battlefield. They cost pretty much only pips, no colorless mana. So I'm going to need something to spend my mana on, and having a mana sink on here to make everything stronger, especially when some of my creatures are getting double strike and lifelink and trample and that kind of stuff. Super, super awesome. And she's going to end up being free with Morophon on the battlefield, which is awesome.
Yeah, that's true. It's Cryptolith Rite is the card we were looking for.
That's
so this is a human Cryptolith Rite, and I am very happy about it.
Yeah. No, I think we're both pretty excited to get our humans tapping for mana.
Yeah. So now that we've gone through the cards, we want to talk about Shirey and Noyandar. And I actually have I'll go first.
Yeah.
It's very quick. I don't have any cards in the set that I want to add to Noyandar. There wasn't anything that jumped out at me. Noyandar can add any instant or sorcery and just be happy with it. There's nothing here that's screaming, add me to Noyandar. So not this time around.
So no hostile for you in Noyandar?
No, because if I flip the hostile, it's no longer a land, it's a creature.
Oh, okay.
So it doesn't get the benefit from it.
Fair enough. Well,
yeah.
For Shirey, I was able to find 2 cards that work, 1 card that is a definite add. So Shirey cares about mono black creatures with power 1 or less, with the ability to kill them and bring them back. So whether those creatures have enter the battlefield effects or death effects, that's what we're looking for. And we're looking for low CMC. The first one we have here is Novice Occultist for 1 and a black. You get a human wizard 1/2 that says when Novice Occultist dies, you draw a card and you lose a life. Card draw is the best thing you can do in Magic the Gathering, right? And on a death trigger, that's not difficult to do in our Shirey deck, and it's going to come back every single turn. The 1 life loss isn't going to end up being a big deal. Play a lot of Blood Artist-like effects in there too. make that go away. So you're going to end up drawing into more answers and stuff. The other card here is Morbid Opportunist. This is a 3-mana 1/3 human rogue, so 2 and a black. It says whenever one or more other creatures die, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. So this is going to draw you an extra card every turn. It itself has 1 power, so it can be another body that Shirey can sacrifice and bring back. It doesn't actually get any benefit from dying or entering the battlefield, so this is more of a card that would just sit out. I would rather have an enchantment in this place if I'm going to have a card that's just going to sit out, something that's a lot harder to remove. It is also 3 mana, and 3 mana is actually a little bit high for the deck. The deck is very, very low to the ground. So this one's probably not going to make it in it, but it's definitely a card that you could put in it. It's at uncommon. It's going to be cheap. If you're looking for a budget Shirey deck, this card would actually be really, really good for it.
Yeah. So now that we've gone through all these cards and we've looked through the set, if you had to pick one of the legendaries, we didn't go through all of them. If you had to pick a legendary, which one would we most likely build? So we do this every set. For this one, I'm very excited about Tovalar, Dire Overlord. So it's been like a meme for a long time, people begging for a good werewolf commander. I think we've got a very good one. It is a 3/3 human werewolf for 1, a red and a green, that says whenever a wolf or werewolf you control deals combat damage to a player, you draw a card. So you can draw multiple cards, definitely needs it. And then at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 3 or more wolves or werewolves, it becomes night, then transform any number of human werewolves you control. So then the night-bound side says whenever a wolf or werewolf you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. So we get to keep the card draw, which is great. But it also has pay X, a red and a green, target wolf or werewolf you control gets +X/+O and gains trample until end of turn. So we've got ways to get damage through. We've got ways to draw cards. I really, really like this card. I had an Arlencord Brawl deck in paper. Believe it or not, I played Brawl in paper when people did that.
Yep.
And that was fun. And then I had Tolsimir, Friend to Wolves. So I have a bunch of wolves, and I had werewolves in that deck. So I have basically the deck, and I just want to put together because it just seems fun to play. So I'm excited. How about you?
I want to get you an altar art of the back of this that just says Toblerone, the midnight snack, and then
the midnight snack.
It's going to be pretty cool. So I wasn't too excited about any of the legendary creatures in the standard set. But if I had to pick one, why not go for a blue-black reanimator? Because, you know, that's what I do. So Ludovic Necrogenius. For blue and a black, you get a 2/3 human wizard. It says when Ludovic Necrogenius enters the battlefield or attacks, mill a card. And then you can pay X blue, blue, black, black to exile X creature cards from your graveyard and transform Ludovic. X cannot be 0, and you can only activate it as a sorcery. And when you transform Ludovic, it turns into Olog Ludovic's Hubris. As this creature transforms into Olog Ludovic's Hubris, it becomes a copy of a creature a card exiled with it, except its name is Olog Ludovic's Hubris. It's 4/4, and it's a legendary blue and black zombie. In addition to its other colors and types, put a +1/+1 counter on Olog equal to the number of creature cards exiled with it. So, you know, it kind of feels like a necrotic ooze, but not that great of a necrotic ooze. Maybe there's something cool with the +1/+1 counters that you can do. But I feel like it is a two mana commander, which it's very good as a 2 mana commander. That. And the fact that the activation to transform it is not going to be affected by your commander tax is also kind of cool in the way that I see it. So there's probably ways, you know, you're going to be able to cheat for 5 mana. You can get a 4/4 version of a Shieldred or something. That's probably
that's so cool.
Yeah, it's probably going to be the best way that you're going to be using Ludovic like that, using 5 mana to get a 4/4 version of a really good, typically really strong creature.
Something with a ridiculous abilities.
How about Phage? You can get a Phage, a 4/4 Phage. It doesn't enter the battlefield, right? It transforms, so you can do you could do a Ludovic Phage deck or something. There's definitely some cool things you can do here. Not super excited, but if I had to pick one, this is what I would build.
Nice. Well, that's it for this week. I'm excited the set comes out in just a couple of weeks here. And next week, we are talking about combos from Midnight Hunt. So stay tuned for next week. But if you want to find me online, you can find me on Twitter at ATFlory.
And you can find me on Twitter at WormCoilEngine. And of course, we want to give a special thanks to our producer and editor, Ryan Nichols. Thank you so much for everything that you do. And another special thanks to Chris Wolf, who handles all of our graphic design. Thank you so much for all that you do. And for all of you listening, Thank you so much for listening, and we will talk to you next week.
Bye.
Bye.